Cool. Ricky, you ready? that's a yes.
That's a yes.
That's a yes. That's great. That's real great. I'm focusing now after that. I'm like really
Boom.
I'm reeling myself in. Hey everyone, welcome to Tabletop Talk. I'm your host Jeremy, and with me is our esteemed host Rick.
Thank you. I believe if release timing and release schedule lines up, I believe this will be the second episode in a row that it is a two-person podcast featuring me. This is wonderful.
That is correct.
I miss our full cast, but having more of me is okay.
Yeah, we gave the people what they wanted. The people wanted more Dr. RPG, and we said, great, here's Rick.
Yep. I last week talked about, and Kyle and I talked about how I was actually doing really well with my main character syndrome, and just all of that flushed down the toilet now.
Yeah, it's slowly just become Rick's podcast with one of us being the guest.
Yeah, great.
It's great.
Awesome.
Well, actually, I think, talking about main character syndrome, right? I think the main character is the person being interviewed, not the interviewer.
Oh, of course.
So this is great. So you're never the host, but the focus is on you. You're getting asked the questions.
I love it.
That'd be a really... And are there any shows where they just have guest interviewers interview the host?
Oh, I don't know. Usually it's always just like the intro of like, let's get to know the person, or like the person will ask questions for like rapport, and then they jump into it. That could be great. It'd be like a really weird like Jeopardy take on it. Like the answers aren't answers; they're questions. And like totally warp it. I dig it. Okay. I think we should keep testing this with more of me content.
Yeah, everyone listening. We might get more than just Rick plus one.
These are probably going to be the worst rated episodes out of our entire fleet of episodes.
Well, thankfully, I don't think Spotify or iTunes will pitch it over to producer Chris, but I don't think they give you episode ratings like IMDb for TV shows.
I hope not.
What am I doing?
Producer Chris, does iTunes and Spotify, they don't allow you to just rate an episode, just one episode, right?
That's correct.
Oh, good.
But you know what you can do? You can rate, review, and follow this show.
Yes.
That's what you can do, right, Producer Chris?
That is correct.
Yeah, we got that in like within 5 minutes. That's a highlight reel for us.
That's like an expertise kind of thing.
Now, anyway, as this is Tabletop Talk, we are going to continue through the 2024 Core Player's Handbook. Mm-hmm. Just what we know with it upcoming. And today we're going to open it up with, we're going to talk about species, backgrounds, and origin feats.
Yes.
So
which is one of the big, air quotes, I guess, but one of the big, I haven't really read through any of, like, as we've said on this podcast a few times, we don't have pre-copies or didn't get stuff from Wizards at all. So
what?
It has been one of the more discussed changes. Whether or not it's going to be one of the bigger changes throughout the whole entire thing, it is one of the more discussed changes that is coming to the new core.
Oh, 100%. So first off, if you hear the word species is the D&D 2024 core way of saying races. Yeah. Previously it was races, now it's species. I can completely understand why they'd want to do that switch, you know. But in the new Player's Handbook, there are 10 species, and 3 of which are new. And you might also be listening, and you're like, wait, was one of mine that I used to play not playable? And that's going to be an interesting topic as well. So the species are, there's the Aasimar, Dragonborn, Dwarf, Elf, Gnome, Goliath, Halfling, Human, Orc, and Tiefling. So 3 of those, the Orc, the Goliath, and the Aasimar, are new playable characters.
New to a base core book, right?
Yeah,
like
new to a base core book. Yeah. And in the past, like a lot of those have been playable by the DM as like a DM PC with some modifications and stuff, but not playable characters outside of supplements or homebrew.
Yeah. Which is good. Like if you're going to go all in on some pretty radical changes, like being able to expand and kind of reach some new avenues or supplement extra material by incorporating some of that into your base is probably good. I would assume that means that they've seen player data and statistics and stuff that say people really like playing as I'm sorry, what were the
Aasimar, Goliath, and Orc. Now here's a really weird thing. There are no half races or half species anymore.
Okay.
So half orc, half elf. Mm-hmm. We're gonna say Dragonborn is not a half species.
Yeah, I don't think
no one knows what it is. I'm just kidding. If you're in there, if you're listening right now and you know what it is, why don't you give us a call? Producer Chris, what's our phone line right now? They can call in, right?
Yes. 555-555-53.
Oh, did we change it from 8675309?
Oh,
they could still reach us there.
Okay.
That's
we have two
great.
phones, two different lines.
Because Kyle just gave me business cards to hand out that say my name on it, and it just says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I thought that was all of ours, but now I'm feeling a little awkward, like it might have just been a for me thing.
Yeah.
Oh, rough. Anyway, the Aasimar, it's based off of the Mordekainen Presents Monsters of the Multiverse, right? That's where they took most of the inspiration. So in the Aasimar, there you can use the Celestial Revelation.
Ooh.
And that's kind of like the way I think about it is like how you are presenting as a Celestial, right? Mm-hmm. Where in the past, like, what type of Aasimar are you? Where's your background and stuff? But this is interesting because they say that it is based on your current mood. So, like, your Celestial Revelation, it's not on your overall character, like...
Yeah.
Instead, it's like, hey, do you feel like you're soaring with heavenly wings? Do you want to be a righteous beacon with your inner radiance? Or do you feel yourself in, like, despair, broken, battered, and you surround yourself with a necrotic shroud?
Interesting. I guess I've always kind of looped and kind of just subconsciously put Ganassi and Aasimar together, because Ganassi are very elemental. And so when you said mood, I was like, oh, that's a huge... Oh, wait, no, they're different. But it's kind of a similar... I like that change. I think it makes it more adaptive to any situation or campaign. It allows for some really creative play, I would imagine, for it to be that adjustable.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I like it, though, because it is interesting, because I feel like part of you're a celestial being, right? Mm-hmm. And I feel like because you're a celestial being, like, that is a very, very big part of who you are. Yeah. But that's just me. I feel like that's how I would look at it as my character. I can completely understand the want to be kind of more fluid. Because, I mean, honestly, we're all very emotional humans, right? Yeah. And so I'm assuming that with all these fantasy races, they are as well, right? Where there's these big differences in how you're feeling and how your power would show.
Yeah. I can see it kind of being a little bit of a DM's worst nightmare with how much the character could change, or some of its, I guess not full change, but some of its abilities or some of its attributes being able to that fluid move in and out depending on mood or what's happening, or just different elements of how you play. I could see that being a little bit added to the DM's plate.
Yeah, or they might like it as it's like flavor. You know what I mean?
True.
Now, moving on, we have the Dragonborn. Dragonborn was already a playable race, but there's a couple interesting changes that I really like. Mm-hmm. One, the breath weapon before used to only be a 15-foot cone. Now you can choose whether it's a 15-foot cone or a 30-foot line.
Ooh, see, I do like that. I like that a lot. I've never played as a Dragonborn, but I've always been very tempted to, but it just feels like a very intense character. Like, I feel like you can't realistically play a Dragonborn without having some sense of arrogance to you. Like, it's a Dragonborn. Like, it's like everyone in the room knows that you're a dragonborn,
Yeah.
and you need to constantly play and have your character have that sense of almost like an arrogance of like, yeah, I'm a dragon. And I don't think I'm quite ready to try and take that on. But every single part of a dragonborn is just like the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah. And speaking of cool, now at level 5 with the Dragonborn, you gain this trait. You gain the ability to grow spectral wings and get temporary flight for 10 minutes, once per long rest.
So I'm going to amend my I haven't played a Dragonborn character before. By the time this episode comes out, I will have a Dragonborn character created. I mean, under the 2014 rules.
Yeah.
But it'll be ready to play under this core 2024. And having only heard 2 of the new species so far, I immediately have a new favorite.
Yeah, now this is an interesting thought now. If you're a whole party of Dragonborns, right, you could spend 50 minutes, like a party of 5, right? 50 minutes handing off a stolen person or
Yes.
stolen bag of goods and flying, where one person flies and then they pass it to the next
Yep.
person who keeps flying and passes it to the next person. That sounds like a DM's nightmare to
Yes.
have a possible 5 people have flight.
Oh, that I just imagine, like I imagine Kyle being our DM and all of us are Dragonborn. We all in sequence activate this ability, and this like mage or like priest or somebody that is like integral to the campaign that we cannot railroad if he's being like for an hour just passed off.
Oh.
Little by little in the air.
Yeah,
Just
completely.
and I would see it as fly, and you're like, oh, my time's almost up. You go higher so you can drop him, and the other one can catch him.
Oh
Rather than
my
like a full
gosh.
football handoff, like
Yeah.
full anarchy chaos. Like,
Yeah.
love it.
Either that or like 10 minutes where all of you are flying.
Yeah.
And you're just doing this crazy pass off. Mm-hmm. So moving on to Dwarf. Dwarf is interesting. So Stone Cunning is replaced with Tremor Sense. So Stone Cunning before was, the Dwarf's ability to kind of know the background of any stone that it would, come into contact with, right? So you gained advantage on history checks
Yeah.
whenever you had, stone in front of you. Now instead, you get Tremor Sense, which is kind of cool. So for 10 minutes, you get this as a bonus action, and while you're on stone surfaces for 10 minutes, you can basically kind of like more sense, kind of like Toph from Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Yes.
So you get kind of like that kind of a feel. You're like a earthbender kind of style.
Right. And I really like that. I feel like that is almost a better and more accurate representation of what generations and generations and generations of like working with the earth. Like Middle Earth is my background of like everything. So I imagine dwarfs being the miners of Moria. And it's like generations and ages of working in the mines.
Yeah.
You're going to get a sense of just from the ground, it's like, oh, I feel this. And you're like, no, I don't feel anything. And then
Yeah.
it comes true.
Between like just like the adaptation, if you're just
Yeah.
talking about thousands and thousands of years living in the mountains,
Yeah.
who's going to sense when the caves are crumbling,
Right.
and who's going to survive?
Yeah, and I do think its current skill, but the races or the species' current skill of like a history check on like the rocks and like the ground, I think is cool. But I feel like that more of like almost like an ethereal sense of what could be happening based on what you feel.
Yeah.
I think is a little bit more indicative of them being like generationally with the ground.
Yeah, it kind of makes dwarves cooler, which dwarves were already cool, but this one, it kind of feels like a bit more like the dwarves have this like spiritual connection to
Yeah.
the ground, which
Yeah.
is awesome.
Yeah.
And I know they already, there's always dwarven crafting and stone crafting and stuff that
Yeah.
with regardless of what fantasy you're looking at, a lot of dwarves are into, crafting or good with mountains and rock, but this is kind of cool because you're like, yeah, now they're physically connected to it.
Yeah, I like that.
So elves are interesting. So there's no half elf, but the elves have a couple ones. So you can choose to be a high elf, a wood elf, or a drow.
And those aren't new. Like you've always kind of had that. Not in the half elf.
Yes.
But in the standard.
Yeah, you
elf.
could do high elf, wood elf, and drow before, but there are some changes. So first off, for your keen senses trait, you choose insight, perception, or survival for which one that you want to actually have the the proficiency with. Drows, Kyle already mentioned this in our past podcast, but drows no longer suffer from the sunlight sensitivity. High elves, they start with prestidigitation cantrip, and then wood elves, their Mask of the Wild has been replaced with knowledge of druidcraft cantrip.
Ooh.
And then this is kind of cool. So this is with elves and tieflings. Both elves and tieflings now get species spells, and they're automatic spells that they get at levels 3 and 5.
Okay.
So it's just a couple spells, but it's tied into their species.
Sure, rather than a class or anything. Or okay.
Yeah. So an example for the elves, these. Sorry about that. Let's see. The elves get wood elf gets long strider at level 3, pass without trace at level 5.
Okay.
And for like the Chthonic Tiefling, they get False Life at level 3, but Ray of Enfeeblement at level 5. So it's interesting that they're working in some spells to species instead of like spells just to like classes.
Yeah. I mean, taking out half species, elves might have some of the biggest change.
Yeah.
So you've got to do something to supplement the drastic like takeaway or change, like the negative effect change.
Yeah, I get that.
So I can see why they've done this. I don't think I like the drow not having sunlight sensitivity, because that's part of playing a character like that. Is you've got to take into account like it's lived its whole life.
Yeah.
In the Underdark, like it is not. It's abyssal, like everything is it's counter to what you typically would play. Like a lot of times there's like certain sets of rules that if you play like a Dragonborn might always have to roll like something to convince characters they're not about to be eaten.
Yeah.
Like, and that's just part of your
part of how you look.
Yeah, because of that, like I kind of feel like that should be still part of the character of like you should still have to work with any onboard weakness to the character, not just the weaknesses that come out in your like backgrounds or like character creation.
That's an interesting point. I mean, I'm thinking that Wizards of the Coast just did this to make it more playable.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I am fully under kind of even just the first few. It's all based around making it just a little bit more easy to play.
Well, yeah, and I wonder how many people wanted to play a drow in the past versus how many people will immediately play a drow right now. And I wonder if they will work with their DM to do the whole Twilight Sparkle thing.
Yes, right. Mm-hmm. I think I've talked about it before, but there's a really good on D&D wiki homebrew for Hyrule for A Legend of Zelda.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of like character races in that aren't normally interacting with, I don't know, most of humanity or like humanoids that you meet. And it's like, and it would say like in the character races, you're like, this character is not normally one seen by anyone. So you cause fear every time someone sees you. And it's like, okay, well, I have to take that into account.
Yeah, no, I like that. So yeah, I think that's probably why they did that. They just want to like, hey, if you remove this disadvantage, then it will become more playable.
Yeah, true. Especially for a drow. Not very many people play drows in general, so being able to have them as a suggested starting like species is pretty cool.
Yeah, but I might agree with you that it's after talking with you, I think they should have kept the sunlight sensitivity and just seeing how many people would play it.
Yeah, like you can, because having it be one of the 10, or I guess a third of one of the 10, since elf is the species, and the drow is just kind of the part of it. And
drows get darkness as a spell. You know, so you get darkness as a spell, you get to use it to your advantage. Maybe you don't get to do the high seas with your drow character, right?
Yeah, but there's still got to be a sense of, like, it's a drow.
Yeah.
It's lived its entire life in the Underdark. Like, how does it adapt to the world above without there being any, like, adjustment or negative consequence?
Yeah. Or maybe you do get to do the high seas, but you're just below deck during the day and at night.
Yeah, you're the night
This
watch.
is actually really interesting. I kind of want to do, like, we'll take the rest of the drow, like, playability, and then instead just make up your own, just homebrew your own sunlight sensitivity.
Yep. Yeah.
You can use the past one if you want, but you could make up a whole new one if you want to make it so it's, like, not as detrimental.
True. Yeah. It could be more of a, like, a not a detriment to the character, but more of just like a, I don't like this, like an inconvenience to the character more than like an actual negative consequence.
Like a seasonal allergy.
Yeah, perfect.
You know what I mean? Like occasionally you'll have to take the day off of work, right?
Yeah.
But not every day. So next one is Gnome. Gnome also gets a couple updates. So gnomes get their speed is now 30 feet. So like a lot of other races, species, I mean.
Yeah.
And then there's two types of gnomes that you can choose: forest gnome and rock gnome. Those both get kind of different things. Forest gnome gets to speak with, instead of speak with small beasts, it's now speak with animals.
Okay.
And the rock gnome gets mending and prestidigitation.
Oh, there you go. Mending is a very underused, like, I believe it's a cantrip, right? Or is that a first level?
No, mending's a cantrip.
Yeah, I don't think people use it enough.
Yeah, mending it's a cool one. So gnomes, it feels like gnomes, other than the speed update to 30 feet and kind of just making it two types of gnomes.
Yeah.
It's pretty well the same from before. It's not, I haven't played a bunch of gnomes before, and I think this is, this is why they've done all these changes to species, from races to species, is so that people might play these races and species that they didn't before. Like before, I would go, what do I want to play? I want to play a bard, and I'd start with my class, and then I'd find out what race went for
That's
it.
100% how I build my characters.
But now I can start with a species and work my way forward, which sounds cool.
Yeah. Are gnomes in the player's handbook now?
Yeah,
Okay.
Gnomes are in the player's handbook.
Yeah, I guess I just have never put much of an effort into playing one, so.
Yeah, well, I'm sure if I was an artificer, I'd probably pick a gnome.
Yeah.
Okay, so next up is a Goliath. So you can now play a Goliath. I know some of you have played Goliaths in the past, especially if you watch Critical Role. You might be like, oh, well, obviously Goliaths are available.
Yeah.
But now they're actually in the player's handbook. Their speed is 35. You get to choose their giant ancestry. So cloud, fire, frost, hill, stone, or storm giant. And at level 5, you get to get large form for 10 minutes. And then you have powerful build. So it was formerly Little Giant. And with Little Giant, you had athletics proficiency. But now instead of that, you get advantage on saving throws against a grappled condition.
Ooh.
And Jim, if you're listening to this, I might have to play a Goliath against you because I've been grappled by so many of your monsters. So many monsters. It's like, oh, and you're grappled. Oh, you're also grappled. Hey, do you like grapples? Because you're grappled.
Yeah. Somebody who's listened to our grappling episode, I see.
Yeah, I know. But at first I thought that the grapple, switching it from athletics proficiency to you only get advantage on saving throws against a grappled condition, I thought that was kind of lame. But then I remembered how many monsters have grappling, like strengths and abilities, bonuses, where it just is like, hey, this tentacle monster is going to grapple you, so now it can hit you and bite you.
Yeah. Goliaths have always been one of those, like, I feel like it's a species definitely geared towards a barbarian. That's most of the Goliaths I've ever seen are barbarians. I've never really played a barbarian role before, so I'm curious. I'm curious how that will show itself, or like what that will do in its other roles.
Yeah, well,
that it could play.
Well, now you can have your Goliath wizard, who, when they try to grapple you, you go, boom, I'm out.
Yeah, perfect.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Next up is Halfling. So Halfling's been completely streamlined, so it's just Halfling.
Okay.
So there's no other types of halfling.
Yeah.
It's just halfling, and there's a couple ones that are like that. Halflings get a couple traits. They're brave, halfling nimbleness, luck, and naturally stealthy. And like the gnome, their speed is 30 feet.
Okay.
So
did I read somewhere that base speed for everything was sort of becoming 30 unless you get something that's faster?
yeah, like Goliath's is 35. Yeah, it's kind of feels like that everything is kind of being pushed up to at least 30
Yeah.
to just make sure that the slow pokes can now keep up.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want your party super spread out. And what it does, I think, too, is it allows characters to still interact with whatever the campaign is dealing with, while being, like, if you were to play a halfling, like, sorcerer or wizard, something you don't necessarily want to be on the front lines, you can still interact, or it's still within your walking speed, so you could still do something, instead of having to really play back, or I'm back too far, and only one person in the party is even within a spell range, so I'll cast this on a party member.
Yeah. Now it does definitely feel, with the whole speeds kind of all getting closer to each other, it does feel like you're kind of morphing the stuff together. You're kind of blending. The speed is an interesting one with a party because you guys can be so spread out. But I do think it's really, I would have liked if they kept the speeds different and maybe even made some of them more drastic. Because usually it was like, hey, someone has a speed of 25, but you have a speed of 30 or 35.
Yeah.
I would have liked to see, like, hey, let's say I'm a Goliath, right? And you're like, oh, well, Goliaths can move really fast, right? Or you're like, maybe Goliaths are so, large, but they're kind of slow, so they move 20 feet, right?
Yeah.
Versus these other ones that move 40 feet. I would have liked to see stuff like that because it makes battles and chasing people, it makes a lot of things more interesting because you have to worry about the rest of your party.
Yeah, it's a nuance. When, back to Middle-earth, when Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli were running around Middle-earth, they weren't all doing it together. Like, they were spread out over, like, different ridges of some of those mountains at one point. So
yeah,
they stuck together eventually, but, like, Gimli was huffing to try and keep up.
Oh, yes, because dwarves are natural sprinters.
Yeah. Perfect.
So the next one is human. This is interesting because there used to be human and variant human.
Yes.
Now there is just human, but from what I can see, it looks like they just took the variant human and just made that the human.
Sure.
Because I never played a human character. Instead, I always played a variant human character because they got an extra proficiency and an extra feat.
Yes. Instead of, I think humans just get the +1 to every stat, but the variant was +1 to like 2 and the feats.
The feat was great. And so they did keep that. So you get an extra feat, but they have specified that it is an origin feat. And we'll get to those later, but there's only, I think, 14 origin feats.
Okay.
So it drastically, brings down the extra feat that you get. So it kind of nerfs the variant human, archetype, subtype. But you still get heroic inspiration, you get proficiency in one skill of your choice, but you get an extra origin feat. Let's see, now we have the orc, which is a playable character, a playable species. The orcs are not all evil, which is going to grind a lot of gears.
Yeah. But I feel like if you're making the choice to make probably one of the most common creatures that your parties over the last multiple decades have gone up against, you have to have that they're not all evil, or you just don't make it a playable character.
Let me pitch this character to you, okay? So picture this, like, orc type. Not super ugly, but not like really pretty, but it looks like he used to be fair at one point, right? He used to be. He takes care of his fellow orcs, takes a lot of care of them, really cares about them, gives them jobs, gives them shelter, and he calls himself Adar.
Yes. Yes, 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 yes. 100% buy-in. Like, Team Adar all the way.
Gosh.
Doesn't matter that if the next time we see him he's going to look slightly different, it's still Adar.
Yes.
Now I can't think of anything else other than like, yeah, Adar is a good manager.
Yeah.
Takes care of his regiment, his fighters. He even opposes Sauron.
Yeah.
Like he is not a Sauron fan. He is just an orc leader.
Yeah. So you can play, you can build your own Adar now.
Yep.
I know he was an Uruk, not an orc, like if you're going to really go into that, but he is playable with some tweaking in this new 2024 core.
No, to get back to what those species themselves, I think having orcs be in a core rule book, not an expansion, not anything else, like not a supplement or a homebrew, having it be in a core rule book that they're a playable character adds so much potential and creativity to what the composition of a party could look like. To have, like, it could be like a Dragonborn where people see Dragonborns and immediately they are terrified. You could have a party that has a Dragonborn and an orc and
a drow and a tiefling.
Yeah, and just be the sweetest, best, most good intended party that has ever existed and cause fear everywhere.
Yeah, I love that. So anyway, orcs, they get Adrenaline Rush. They have Orc Dark Vision, which is 120 feet. Dwarves also have Dark Vision to 120 feet. And orcs no longer have the powerful build feature. So that is a just Goliath thing now.
Okay. I think I might have to start playing as
and then
orc when this
the last one that
out.
gets some changes is Tiefling. Tiefling has a choice of 3 lower planes of Fiendish Legacy, Abyssal, Chthonic, Infernal, and like I said earlier, they do get a pair of spells at levels 3 and 5. Now, this is a really interesting thing. So now ability scores are not tied to species, and no species receives weapon or armor proficiencies.
Okay. That you hear, I've heard lots of voices that talk about things being really, everybody is the same, kind of pared down, like really, not normalizing, but just very like standardizing on a lower end everybody all together, and that could be where I see a lot of this originating from. Taking some of those bonuses out of like the species themselves seems a bit of a choice. That it'll be. I'm intrigued to see how that gets from the public, how that gets the perception of that.
I like it more because now I will play a broader range of species.
True. Like I've never ever wanted to play an orc before. And now I'm already trying to figure out how to build Adar as a character. As I'm already still trying to figure out how to best play and create the Witch King of Angmar. Like, I might just make the Mordor army.
Yeah, you could. I like that a lot. And it's funny, even just talking about this stuff makes me want to create all of these different species, but just do them all as bards. Because I love bards, and I'll just be like, hey, I want to have all of these interchangeable bards with different like backgrounds and species, right?
Yeah.
Because I want to bard so hard, you know?
Yeah. An orc is a metalhead, right?
Yeah.
Like
well,
a Judas Priest, like Metallica, like...
Or are we thinking that the orc is more like Ferdinand, you know, and he's actually just a florist?
Oh. An orc that is like a huge Cat Stevens fan?
Yeah.
Oh my god. This is the greatest thing that's ever happened.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just imagine a party with just a really, really sweet orc who loves to bake.
A Quaker pacifist orc.
Yeah.
Who has to constantly struggle against the public perception that he's just the worst thing that's ever happened.
Yeah.
And he's just this pacifist, refuses to harm anyone. We'll make him like I guess in that sense, probably a wizard.
Yeah.
Sorcerer's got too many offensive spells.
Wizard, bard, you could have it.
Yeah, a bard.
Yeah, that is a druid, and he just like uses plant growth to make the surrounding areas grow.
You just want to avoid Circle of the Moon for any of the beast shape or the wild shape stuff.
Yeah.
So,
I like that.
I think this might have just fully tipped my perception of this new core rulebook into like a heavily yes.
Yeah. Now it's interesting. Obviously, there's some stuff where it was nerfed a little, but there's a lot of boosts, and I do get why that might be off-putting to some people where they're like, hey, why are you making Dungeons and Dragons so easy?
Yeah.
And I will combat that just by saying that your DM has full ability to make it a lot harder in any way that they want.
Yeah. Well, and as you look at some of these influencers and these people that have the scope and the audience to get some of these pre-release and to see it before it goes public, all of them talk about these changes with you also have the ability to play the 2014 rules in any fashion alongside these. Like, it's not the 2014 rule book is not going away. It's not being replaced. This isn't a new addition to where we can't call back to all of these source books that we already have. It's just a little bit of an update to that we can flush in heavily into the campaigns, or you can say, you know what, I really only want my Cat Stevens obsessed Quaker pacifist orc.
Yeah.
And that's all I'm going to grab. Like what we do with source books now of like, I'm not using any of the material out of this except for the ability to make this subclass.
Yeah, I love that. I think your Cat Stevens orc would go perfectly with my Gym Rat orc.
Oh, yes. Perfect. And the biggest thing with, like, as I'm like now completely multitasking in my like brain waves, he's a huge fan of Cat Stevens, has 0 vocal singing abilities. So like everyone hates when he tries to sing to the songs because he can't sing for anything.
It's great. I feel like we need to redo our intro. Producer Chris, how about this? Welcome to Tabletop Talk, ADHD edition. I think we nailed it.
Perfect. That's the ADHD edition is just when it's Jeremy and I. How many times can they talk about Lord of the Rings, and how many rabbit holes will they go down? The challenge is, can they actually complete the tasks that they were asked to do for the episode? And the answer will be no.
Well, no, I think we do. Yes. We do, but it just is like, oh, they've just gone 5 minutes down this, and then it's immediately back into the other thing, like it never stopped.
Yeah, perfect. It's like going on side quests on a video game where the main story is just sitting there waiting for you to do the next thing. You're like, no, I'm gonna go do all these, and then 3 months of gameplay later, you're like, okay, let's go back to that. And it's like, boom, immediately right back, and you're like, I don't even remember what we were talking about, but somehow we're right on track.
Yep. Man, okay, so to finish it out, just really quick, we're not going to deep dive into the origin background feats, but I just want to let you know. So, like I said, the ability scores are not deemed by species.
Yeah.
They're now from your background. And each of your backgrounds, no matter what you pick, I think there's 16 backgrounds, you get you get all 5 of these things. So you get ability scores, so you can increase 1 by 2 and another by 1, or 3 by 1. For instance, the Wayfarer offers you dexterity, wisdom, charisma. Each one gets an origin feat that's specific to that one. Each one gets skill proficiencies, a tool proficiency, and starting equipment. So basically, you can start with your background and species and move to your class, or you can think of your class idea that you want. And then just incorporate what background goes with that class.
I feel like in the natural narrative of creating a character, this is probably what makes more sense. Like, hey, what is your character going to be? And what have they learned? What have they trained in? That's where you get all this stuff. It doesn't matter who or what you are. It matters what you do. I also think this is built after what has to be years of complaints from DMs, from characters and players that don't put enough effort into their backstories and their origins. Oh
my gosh, it has to be. I didn't even think of that.
Like, you don't get any of your stuff until you put actual effort into what your character is. Please explain and tell me what this is. And I'm sure with all of these bonuses coming into this part of your character creation, it's going to be a lot easier to now put real effort into some backgrounds and character stories and all of these. So, but I have to imagine that is where this came from.
Yeah. Now, the min-maxers out there, I have to tell you, origin feats do not open yourselves up to every feat in the game. And to the DMs out there who are afraid of the min-maxers, just know that the origin feats, it's just a small amount of origin feats that they can get.
Yeah. And it's essentially all of these like the ability scores and ability increases that would have come from a class or your race now just being put in a different area.
Yeah.
That's probably going to be more beneficial for the DM.
Yes.
As far as environment of the gameplay.
Yeah, and I like the idea that you choose your background and that goes with who your character is, instead of it being like, oh, well, I want to be a rogue, so obviously I'm a sneaky little halfling.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, so anyway, if you want to look at any of the species, any of the backgrounds, any of the origin feats, I would highly suggest that you go to D&D Beyond, look at a couple of their articles. One is called The Backgrounds and Origin Feats in the 2024 Player's Handbook, and the other one is called The 10 Species in the 2024 Player's Handbook, both by Riley Silverman. They're just really, really well done. They give you a nice overview without actually handing you the book yet, because we don't have the book yet.
Yeah.
But it's what you should know. So to wrap it up, there's no longer races, it's now species. Species don't give you the ability scores from before. They now come from your background, which also gives you an origin fee, and you can play an Aasimar, you can play a Goliath, and you can play an Orc.
Yes. To also make an amendment to some, when we talked about originally this new core book coming out, and I talked about like where to buy, how to get it. A new piece of information has come to light.
Ooh.
That, as this episode comes out, will be a lot closer to actual launch date, but are still technically going to be in pre-order. Check out your local game stores. Like, I know I mentioned like that's a place to find it. Definitely check out your local play stores, because there are certain ones. I don't know how to find a list of them. I know that there's one locally to our show here in like the Pacific Northwest and West Seattle that's getting a special like cover art edition.
Oh, special art.
Yep.
Nerd alert.
Yep.
Gonna get it.
Yep. So if you are one that knows your local card shop, play shop, whatever, reach out to them. See if they're going to get one that might be a special art, because that's going to be a real hot item that's going to be super cool for you to show to people. Be like, I bought it at this store. Look at my art. Because the base rule books have a very unique art to themselves, where all three, the core book, the monster manual, and the DM guide, are going to kind of create a scene together.
Yeah.
But to be able to have a custom, like, unique art to it is going to be one of those, like, can't miss items.
Oh, I'm having a crisis because now I just realized I might have to buy both. Just for the cover. It's just a cover, Jeremy, but it looks so good on the shelf.
Yeah, but I'm sure if enough people talk about it, they'll just release like a poster or like a print of it.
That's fair. All right. Well, that is our episode. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Hit that follow, hit that subscribe, rate, review, leave a comment. Let us know why you need more Kyle, more Dr. RPG, or just more ADHD brain with Rick and Jeremy.
Perfect.
That's us. This has been Tabletop Talk. Adios. That's great.
Did they miss me?
Kyle appears.
Why are you in my house?